UN, Maurice Strong, climate and development pioneer, dies. And you are looking, whether you know it or not, at Maurice Strong, and you probably don't know it, because unlike some of the other globalist supergophers of the last century or so, Maurice Strong is one that, well, not exactly evading the spotlight, certainly does not have as much of a reputation as one would think he should, given how prolific he was in his career as a committed globalist supergopher. And in order to get an idea of who Maurice Strong was, I guess you can turn to AP reports like this one posted up at ABC News, talking about how the Canadian-born Strong, the first UN Environment Program chief, organized the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, which led to the launch of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, which of course is having its COP21 conference right now in Paris, where the misleaders of the world are converging to pledge their fealty to the coming global carbon eugenics government. And of all the people on the planet, probably no one individual was as responsible for what is happening in Paris right now as Maurice Strong was. Not only the founding director of the UNEP, but also the body that birthed the IPCC and organized the Rio Earth Summit and that launched the UNFCCC, and so many other things besides in his career that we're going to get into just a bit of in the next few minutes here. But again, you can turn to some of the stories that have come out in the last few days about his death. Manitoba Friends remember environmental pioneer Maurice Strong, again talking about a committed environmentalist and listing some of his accomplishments in that regard. Globe and Mail, Maurice Strong, environmental movement loses a founding father, a spiritual godfather, perhaps might be a more apt term for reasons we'll get into. But yes, again, going through his environmental credentials. And I like one of the turns of phrase in here. I think it's revealing. This loss comes only 3 days before the latest increasingly desperate attempt to force a serious deal on global warming, among other things, gets underway in Paris. Among other things. Yes, that's true. It's a deal on global warming, among other things, that they're working on right now in Paris. And again, Maurice Strong. It's interesting that he died a few days before that conference got underway, although we don't know exactly when he died, where he died, or how he died, or any of the details of his death, which perhaps is fitting for someone who did lead a mysterious life in a number of ways. But of course, you can also turn to the UNEP itself, their news center, for their press release. The world mourns one of its greats. Maurice Strong dies. His legacy lives on. And of course, again, talking about his career and his time as founding executive director of the UN Environment Program, which sprang from the 1972 conference, the Earth Conference, the Earth Summit in Stockholm, which he chaired. So again, a very interesting career. And Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, had an official statement up on the PM's blog a few days ago on this. So a lot of this type of peons to his, what a great person he was, an environmentalist and philanthropist. He uses remarkable business acumen, organizational skills, and humanity to make the world a better place, saith Justin Trudeau. Well, Trudeau is actually a name that figures in the Maurice Strong legacy, because Trudeau, not Justin, but father, Pierre, was a protege of Maurice Strong, who actually hired him at Power Corporation, which, as people who watch the Corbett Report will know, is a Canadian globalist supergopher organization that has spawned a lot of prominent political figures in Canada's history, including not only Maurice Strong, who took over running Power Corporation at the age of 35, but he also hired in Paul Martin, former Prime Minister Paul Martin. So again, lots of connections going on there. One of the, I guess the best, or I don't want to say the best because that makes it sound it's good, but it's one of the most balanced summaries I've seen in the last few days is here from National Post. Pete Foster, the man who shaped the climate agenda in Paris, Maurice Strong, leaves a complicated legacy, to say the least. Again, it's something of a whitewash, but it gets more into the depth of who Maurice Strong was and why this is important than any of the other articles I saw. So just reading from this article, Clarkson claimed that Strong had invented the environment. While that may have been somewhat exaggerated, he did play a critical role in promoting political responses to environmental concerns. As a lifelong socialist, he saw the potential of the environmental movement to fight capitalism and introduce a system of global governance that would coordinate all human activity. It should send shivers down your spine, but let's go on. Before the last great failed attempt to come up with a global climate agreement at Copenhagen in 2009, which took place at a time of economic turmoil, Strong said, "The climate change issue and the economic issue come from the same roots, and that is the gross inequity and the inadequacy of our economic model. We now know that we have to change that model. We cannot do all of this in one stroke, but we have to design a process that would produce agreement at a much more radical level." And it goes on to talk about some of the interesting parts of his past, including, of course, his time running Power Corp and Ontario Hydro and Petro-Canada and a number of other businesses that one might think is a bit strange for this committed environmentalist to have been part of. But anyway, he was also reputed to be a Buddhist, but when Pope Francis issued his climate encyclical earlier this year, he praised Strong's Earth Charter, a manifesto of green revolution co-signed by Mikhail Gorbachev, as a document that asked us to leave behind a period of self-destruction and make a new start. It talks again about some of his checkered past, which I'll leave you to explore on your own time. I will include in the show notes for this video Who is Maurice Strong, that was published in the National Review in 1997, again talking about his very, very improbable rise through the ranks as a 14-year-old junior high school dropout from the middle of nowhere, Manitoba, to become a extremely influential wheeler and dealer at the international level. Again, a globalist supergopher who, amongst many, many other things, was president of the World Federation of United Nations Associations, on the executive committee of the Society for International Development, an advisor to the Rockefeller Foundation and the World Wildlife Fund. Not a strange pairing, by the way, for those who are unaware of those connections. Above all, he served on the Commission on Global Governance, and again, many, many other things besides Canadian International Development Agency and all sorts of other very strange parts of his career. And one might wonder how he did manage such an incredible rise, which you get some taste of in this article by Henry Lamb from January 97, Maurice Strong, the new guy in your future. Quote, he ran away from home at 14. He further his father retrieved him from Vancouver, but in 1945, after completing the 11th grade, Strong was off again to become an apprentice fur trader in Hudson Bay. Strong's business success was remarkable. At 19, he was an investment analyst. At 25, he was vice president of Dome Petroleum. At 31, he became the president of Power Corporation of Canada. He headed both Petro-Canada and Hydro-Canada and made a few deals on the side as well, one of which was the acquisition in 1978 of the Colorado Land and Cattle Company, which owned 200,000 acres of San Luis Valley in Colorado from Saudi arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi. The ranch called Baca sat on the continent's largest freshwater aquifer. Strong intended to pipe the water to the desert southwest, but environmental organizations protested and the plan was abandoned. Strong ended up with a $1.2 million settlement from the water company, an annual grant of $100,000 from Lawrence Rockefeller, and still retained the rights to the water. An interesting story, and also interesting for the New Age weird ranch that he set up on that land. Again, some weird New Age occultish kind of things going on in his background that will be apparent in some of this reading that I'll be giving you. But again, just a strange thing. How did this all happen? Well, Strong's first exposure to the UN came in 1947 when, at 18, remember at that time when he's still a runaway, who at that time was still not even past the 11th grade, he went to New York to take a job as an assistant pass officer in the identification unit of the security section of the UN. He lived with Noah Manaud, then treasurer of the UN. Here he first met David Rockefeller, and learned that the UN's funds were handled by Rockefeller's Chase Bank. He also met the other Rockefeller brothers and other influential people as well, including John J. McCloy And that went on to serve him extremely well, because by 1951 he had taken a job with Dome Petroleum, remember, at the age of 25, on whose board of directors was Henry Bruni, a close friend of John J. McCloy. Dome became one of the largest oil companies in Canada, but its shareholders resided on Wall Street, never far away from Standard Oil and the Rockefellers. So from this milieu, as the extremely young vice president of an extremely influential Canadian oil company with shareholders on Wall Street, friend of John J. McCloy, and hobnobbing with Standard Oil and the Rockefellers, from that background comes the person talking about how global government is necessary to save us from the oil companies and the problem that they're creating. Again, not so strange when you actually start to look into the history of this global warming fraud and where it's really coming from. But this is just one of those picture-perfect examples of how this all nexuses together. The life story of Maurice Strong. So it's interesting, I guess fortunate in a way, that he died right now so that we have the chance to talk about this and bring it all up. I have talked about Maurice Strong before, including, of course, in my podcast episode on the IPCC Exposed. Again, link in the show notes so you can watch the full video or listen to the full podcast in MP3 format. But here's a little section where Dr. Timothy Ball is talking about how, yes, Maurice Strong, as head of UNEP, birthed the UNFCCC and literally wrote the guidelines, the framework for the IPCC's terms of reference.
So when they set up the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Maurice Strong, who we should talk a lot about, he wrote the terms of reference. And the first term of reference was the definition of climate change. And he limited it deliberately to only human causes of climate change. And of course that effectively eliminated all the natural causes, natural variability, which is why you see them not looking at things like the sun and a whole bunch of other issues. And of course he then limited it even further in another term of reference that he set it up into three working groups. There was the technical group, working group 1, which wrote the science report. And that was 600 of the 2,500 people. The other 1,900 were in working groups 2 and 3. Now, they were inconsequential because they had to accept the findings of working group 1, which were already limited by their terms of reference. So whatever their finding was, working groups 2 and 3 then said, okay, you telling us it's going to warm, we accept that as fact. We now look at the implications of that, and that's where you hear all these stories about, the ice is going to melt, the sea level is going to rise. So really, the majority of the report by 1,900 scientists is accepting without question the finding of the first group.
All right, again, I'll let you continue with that full episode, which is very important at this moment in time, so I hope you are spreading the word about it and the interesting parts about the IPCC that no one really knows how it functions. But there you go, Maurice Strong literally writing the terms of reference that limit the ways in which the IPCC can even think about the topic of climate change, and obviously what conclusions they're going to come to as a result of that. Again, just a remarkable career, and I did devote about half of a podcast episode simply to Maurice Strong and his highly improbable story, the episode 87, The UN Doesn't Love You, which goes through a lot of the Maurice Strong story. There's maybe a half dozen references in here, lots of reading and things to listen to. So if you do want more, and I really hope you will take the time to start to learn about this character and the influence he had, episode 87 of the Corbett Report podcast would be a good place to start. But just one thing that I really wanted to highlight, because again, it shows the bizarre nature of some of this once you really start to peel away some of the layers. It should be noted, as I believe we just talked about a few minutes ago, he was also, amongst all his other various duties as globalist committed supergopher, he was also the person who, along with Mikhail Gorbachev, led one of the organizations that created the Earth Charter. What is the Earth Charter?
Took up the challenge. And what is the Earth Charter? It's a statement of ethical and moral principles designed to guide the conduct of people and nations towards each other and towards the Earth, to ensure the future security and survivability of humankind and other forms of life on Earth. And there's
Well, that doesn't really explain very much, but if you want more information, you can go to earthcharterinaction.org. Inaction? Oh, inaction.org, where they have the Earth Charter itself and the write-up on it. What is the Earth Charter? An ethical framework for building a just, sustainable, and peaceful global society in the 21st century, blah, 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 blah. The drafting of the Earth Charter involved the most inclusive and participatory process ever associated with the creation of an international declaration. This process is the primary source of its legitimacy as a guiding ethical framework. The legitimacy of the document has been further enhanced by its endorsement by over 6,000 organizations, including many governments and international organizations. In light of this legitimacy, an increasing number of international lawyers recognize that the Earth Charter is acquiring the status of a soft law document. Soft law documents, like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, are considered to be morally, but not legally, binding on state governments that agree to endorse and adopt them, and they often form the basis of the development of hard law. Interesting. So, well, let's read a little bit of the charter, shall we? What is this charter, this soft law, Universal Declaration of Human Rights-like document that's being adopted by all, or at least endorsed by all of these different governments around the world? We stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly interdependent and fragile, the future at once holds great peril and great promise. To move forward, we must recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. We must join together to bring forth a sustainable global society founded on respect for nature, universal human rights, economic justice, and a culture of peace. Towards this end, it is imperative that we, the peoples of Earth, declare our responsibility to one another, to the greater community of life, and to future generations. Talks about Earth, our home, the global situation, challenges ahead, universal responsibility. And then comes the principles: respect and care for the community of life, respect Earth and life in all its diversity, secure Earth's bounty and beauty for present and future generations, ecological integrity, protect and restore the integrity of Earth's ecological systems, adopt patterns of production, consumption, and reproduction that safeguard Earth's regenerative capacities, advance the study of ecological sustainability, their social and economic justice, eradicate poverty, ensure that economic activities at all levels promote human development, affirm gender equality, uphold the right of all without discrimination to a natural and social environment supportive of human dignity, democracy, nonviolence, and peace, strengthen democratic institutions, integrate into formal education and lifelong learning the knowledge and values of a sustainable way of life, promote a culture of tolerance, nonviolence, and peace. Again, all of the most wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed political platitudes that you can imagine stuffed into one document, but just like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we've been over before on this podcast, at the very end comes the interesting little poison pill, or one of the poison pills. I mean, there's lots of ways that this mealy-mouthed language can be converted into very tyrannical stuff, but I think it's interesting. In order to build a sustainable global community, the nations of the world must renew their commitment to the United Nations, fulfill their obligations under existing international agreements, and support the implementation of Earth Charter principles with an international, legally binding instrument on environment and development. Hey, that kind of sounds like what we're starting to get with the COP21 in Paris, doesn't it? Earth Charter in action, indeed. Well, so this, I mean, it's a creepy document in a lot of ways, and just to add to the creepiness, both Gorbachev and Maurice Strong likened it to the Ten Commandments and said they were trying to create something like the Ten Commandments for our age. And, well, what do you do with the Ten Commandments? You put them in an ark, not the Ark of the Covenant, in this case, the Ark of Hope. They literally created this Ark of Hope as a refuge for the Earth Charter and Temenos books. I told you Maurice Strong is caught up in this weird occultish new age stuff, and I'm not joking. You can go and take a look at this weird box that they created to house the Earth Charter in, with the crippled children on the front and all of this just weirdness. But it gets even weirder. The Ark of Hope was created for a celebration of the Earth Charter held at Shelburne Farms, Vermont on September 9th, 2001. The event, For Love of Earth, featured keynote speaker Jane Goodall, global peace walker Satish Kumar, musician Paul Winter, and Dr. Stephen C. Rockefeller, yes, that Rockefeller of that Rockefeller family, Nelson's son, a member of the Earth Charter Commission. Yes, the Rockefellers are on the Earth Charter Commission. On September 11th, 2001, volunteers were cleaning up from the September 9th event when news of the New York and Washington, D.C. terrorist attacks and tragedies was heard. Sally Linder's immediate, spontaneous response to the horror was to begin walking the Ark of Hope to New York and the United Nations. Joined by Andrea Morgant and Janet Fredericks, they carried the 200-pound chest across the meadows of the farm to Route 7, where they were joined by Susan Deal Dufort. Hundreds of walkers joined the pilgrimage to New York City, bringing with them hope and the vision of the Earth Charter to communities along the way. For 2 months, the Ark of Hope was walked over 350 miles through 4 states. Blah, blah, blah. Due to heightened security at the United Nations, the Ark of Hope rested at New York's Interfaith Center upon arrival. And again, it's such a weird story that just ties so beautifully into all of the craziness of Maurice Strong's story in general. So there you go. Maurice Strong is dead. And if you didn't know who this guy was, I suggest you use the show notes to start getting acquainted with him, because his story very, very much ties into the grander story of who is funding the entirety of what we're seeing going on in Paris right now and why they are funding it. Just again, one of these supergophers whose life is a nexus for so many things. Much more to say on this, but we'll end it there for today. James Corbett, corbettreport.com.